more importantly, it probably leaves Trump himself quite isolated. His two big signature policies are, for the meantime, anyway, frustrated: tariffs and the tax bill, which came in over last weekend. Very significant that Elon Musk yesterday came out against that tax bill publicly. So this presidency is now looking a little bit isolated and frustrated.
To that tariffs story first, a big setback for Donald Trump's big thing since he came to power: the use of tariffs to pursue all kinds of policies, not just trade but border security, immigration, drugs. There is a reason why he called tariff the most beautiful word in the English language. Our business correspondent Dominic OConnor is here. Good morning.
Morning.
So what has happened here?
Well, nearly all of Trump's tariffs were imposed under a law called IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which came into force in 1977. It itself was a reining back of an earlier law called the Trading with the Enemy Act, which dated from the First World War, and it gives the president quite broad powers to impose tariffs in time of national emergency. But I've just been reading the act. Actually, you do have to prove to Congress that there is a genuine national emergency and produce evidence that there is. Almost as soon as Trump started imposing tariffs, there were challenges in this court, the Court of International Trade. The first one was from a company called VOS Selections, which is a New York wine importer. 4 other companies joined that one. There were also challenges by individual state attorney generals, Oregon, New York, and 10 other states. And it was a very interesting court case. One of the judges made a bit of history when she questioned, her name was Janet Rastani, questioned whether a shortage of peanut butter could be considered a national emergency, an inconvenience to some but not necessarily a crisis. And in essence, they've told Trump he hasn't proved there is a genuine emergency. The court does not read IEEPA to confer such unbounded authority. And as we heard earlier, the White House has said it will appeal.
In terms of how Trump has strategized around this, his imposition of tariffs, even the announcement of tariffs, then imposition of tariffs, it has been quite erratic insofar as it has been challenged. He's kind of said this is going to happen, then he's eased off again. But in the months that he's been in office, this has had an impact on prices, on trade deals. I mean, we talk of the UK sort of agreement that's floating in the air waiting to be pinned down. It has been and this is the latest chapter of how erratic this has been.
Well, it has been extremely erratic. The court decision will certainly embolden those who want to challenge tariffs, and certainly other trading partners who want to take on Trump tariffs. There'll definitely be some legal wrangling over this decision, certainly an attack on the judges, I'm sure, from the White House, and an attempt to reimpose them, either a new set of tariffs that the court, based on this decision, that the court will not overturn, or using other legislation. It does, as you say there, leave trade deals that he's already done, like the UK trade deal, up in the air. It's not a deal yet. It's an agreement to talk about things. I think more importantly, it probably leaves Trump himself quite isolated. His two big signature policies are, for the meantime, anyway, frustrated: tariffs and the tax bill, which came in over last weekend. Very significant that Elon Musk yesterday came out against that tax bill publicly. So this presidency is now looking a little bit isolated and frustrated.
Musk has subsequently announced his departure from the administration as well, which is notable. We'll consider that through the programme. We should turn then to how financial markets are reacting to all of this.
Fairly muted reaction. The Nikkei, the main index in the Japanese stock market, is up 1.6% overnight. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong just up 0.6%. The oil price has moved up a bit, thinking this might stimulate demand for oil. It's up about 1% to $65 a barrel. I think markets have learnt quite quickly over the last few months not to react too much either way in the wake of developments on tariffs.
I'm considering as well the EU trade deal that is yet to be done with the US, and the implications for this. One take is that Trump doesn't have the leverage that he thought he might over blocs like the EU.
Yes, exactly that. So the EU negotiators now will think, well, his threat to impose tariffs is an empty one, given that the court has struck these tariffs down and will strike any new tariffs down imposed under IEEPA. Some of the EU tariffs, though, the ones on steel, for example, might well stay because they're under different bits of legislation. Trump may also be forced to go the whole machinery of an investigation into a market before tariffs are imposed. That can take several months.
And it might be too soon for this, Dom, but is there any sort of read on net positive or net negative for businesses in the US of this last, 4 or 5 months?
Well, businesses in the US will probably be quite happy about this, some of them anyway, because, for example, this New York-based wine importer, I've just been looking at their website, they were very unhappy at having to pay all these tariffs on all the wine they imported from Europe, for example. So they're very unhappy about that. So some individual companies were very happy. Those who had manoeuvred to try and get round tariffs might be a bit less happy, given that they have made all this effort and then it seemed to be worthless. One of the big battles that's going on at the moment, and Trump has made a big thing about this, is about where Apple makes its iPhones. They moved them from part of it from China to India for the US market. Trump's not happy with that. He's still putting the heat on Apple to move a lot of its production into the US. Whether he still has the levers to do this following this court case remains to be seen.
And crucially, actually, we should mention as well that some tariffs are unaffected by this ruling. So tariffs on cars and steel remain.
Those are Section 232 tariffs, and are a different bit of legislation, and actually date back to an original set of tariffs that Trump put in place in its first presidency. So yes, unaffected.
Dominic, thank you very much. That's Times Radio's business correspondent, Dominic O'Connor, who will be here throughout the morning as we gauge responses, reaction and impact of this ruling, which is, I think, in many ways, really quite surprising, given that courts would generally be expected to be subservient to the president, to the executive in the US when it comes to national security issues. And that is how Trump has framed this, as a national security issue, as Dom was just explaining. So this kind of interruption to one of Trump's foundational policies of this administration is something of a surprise. And it's not the end of it. That's the other part of this as well. So then, he is vulnerable. He is perhaps more vulnerable to events and pressures than even Trump would care to concede, whether that is the courts, as has been the case in actually several of his policies now, or indeed the financial markets, which we will keep reflecting on throughout the morning as well.
Particularly if we look at how Donald Trump rules, which is with drastic action and quite quick, sudden action. But the court have said, look, you've overstepped your authority in this regard.
A U.S. federal trade court has blocked President Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs from going into effect. Wednesday's ruling from the Manhattan-based Court of International Trade said the president had overreached his authority. The court said Congress is empowered by the Constitution to regulate international commerce, and the president's use of emergency powers does not override that power. The Trump administration appealed the ruling within minutes. Trump had claimed broad authority in order to impose his tariffs in April. He cited an emergency powers law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to set 10% duties on all imports. Countries with the highest U.S. trade deficits saw even higher rates, particularly China. The law has historically been used for sanctions against Washington's enemies, but Trump is the first U.S. president to use it to impose tariffs, as he had argued the trade deficit was a national emergency. A 3-judge panel disagreed in Wednesday's ruling, saying, "The court does not pass upon the wisdom or likely effectiveness of the president's use of tariffs as leverage. That use is impermissible not because it is unwise or ineffective, but because federal law does not allow it." That ruling came after a pair of lawsuits. One was filed by the nonpartisan Liberty Justice Center on behalf of 5 small U.S. businesses. They ranged from a wine and spirits importer to a maker of musical instruments, all importing goods targeted by tariffs. The other lawsuit was brought by the Democratic Attorneys General of 13 U.S. states. The White House and lawyers for groups that sued did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Stephen Miller, a White House deputy chief of staff and leading Trump advisor, said in a brief social media post, quote, "The judicial coup is out of control." Trump has said his tariffs are intended to restore U.S. manufacturing, but suspending, delaying, or raising them since his tariff decisions have sent shockwaves and uncertainty through financial markets. At least 5 other legal challenges to the tariffs are pending.